Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. So excited to be chatting with you all about schema markup and AI search visibility. It is 2 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started, but I know that there will probably be some people trickling in over the next few minutes. So to give them a minute to get in and get settled, I will quickly give an overview of Nexus Marketing. So Nexus is a digital marketing agency. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you hear a couple of spare y'alls, please forgive. And our specialization is in demand generation and revenue generation for businesses that are selling specifically into mission-driven industries. So typically our clients are either software or service providers who are selling to or serving nonprofits, healthcare organizations, educational institutions of various kinds, whether that's higher ed or K-12, and associations. There are a lot of overlap in those verticals, so that's why we use that slightly broader mission-driven language. Before we go ahead and fully dive into some content, I would be really curious, and I'm actually going to quickly publish this poll now. I would love to know, kind of just based off of this current group that we have, where are you currently on your GEO journey with AI visibility? Just want to get a sense of where people are. I've talked to loads of people all the time that are in this kind of like, haven't started, not sure where to start, or maybe in these kind of planning stages, they're thinking about what they need to do, maybe know a little bit, but maybe haven't started implementing that. So I'd be curious to see, seeing lots of people in the planning stages, not too many that are in this kind of not sure where to get started realm. Okay, great. Love to get a sense of where everyone is. That is fabulous. Okay, great. I love to see that there are some people already implementing GEO strategies. That's fabulous. All right. Well, it is 2:02, so I think we've hopefully let people in for the stragglers. Yes, just one kind of housekeeping note. We do have a member of our team in the chat as an admin. So if you're running into any technical difficulties, feel free to use the chat feature and send them a quick message. We'll also do a quick Q&A at the end, depending on what the questions are and how much time we have. So you can either drop those in the chat, feel free to use that as much as you'd like, or there is the questions feature on the bottom right-hand side of your page as well. You're welcome to leave that there. Okay, just just kiddings this time. We're actually gonna dive into things. Oh, not sure why the images on my slide deck are acting weird, but just want to give a quick note on, in general, how LLMs work based off of this this group that we're seeing. It looks like most people probably have a good understanding, so I'll move quickly through these. So historically, LLMs were trained on static content. So in the kind of first iterations of these generative AI tools, basically they would be trained on a specific set of content. You would then ask it a question. It would use the content that it had already been trained on to answer that question. And therefore the answer you would get was just more limited because it was all it could pull from was the data and the information you had already fed it. It wasn't pulling it from anywhere else. Nowadays, these tools use a process called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, to augment their answers that they're generating to answer queries. So basically, again, you put in the query, it bounces that to, in the case of most of these LLMs, Bing, retrieves fresh content from Bing, and then uses that plus the information it's already been trained on to create the kind of best augmented, fullest answer there. So just a quick note again, want to make sure everyone has a general understanding of how these tools work. So why are we talking about schema, right? I think it's something that I'm hearing a lot about. People ask me a lot of questions about. But why is that? Why is it important? Why is it even something that we're thinking about? Well, what we know is, and what Google and Microsoft have both iterated themselves and reiterated, is that schema and structured data is, an important part of making sure that your content performs well on their AI experiences. So when you're thinking about like Google AI, whether that's, you're using like Gemini specifically, or, you're looking at the AI overviews on your like traditional Google search, structured data is a really important part of that. Google has said that themselves, Bing as well. So while, we know that it helps, this is information that, we're getting, as recently as 3 months ago from Google and Microsoft. So something we really want to think about, and I've got some sources linked here from their various blogs. I'm happy to share those out afterward as a resource if you're interested. Happy to do that. They're really useful reads, and there's a bunch of stuff on there beyond just structured data. So please let me know if you'd like me to share those. Happy to. And I've got a couple of other things that I can include as well. Speaking of other resources that are super interesting that we're going to be walking through, really interesting business called AISO ran their own experiment in January of this year on Schema Markup. They are a platform that helps with AI search visibility, and they basically ran a test where they created basically 2 versions of the same like fake company website. They did, a bunch of like product pages, CEO stuff, like all of this on a fake company. And they did, basically created 2 identical versions of the website, one using Schema Markup, one not using Schema Markup. And overall, the results of what they found were that pages that incorporated Schema Markup were more accurately understood, summarized, and sourced by AI. So across the board, Schema Markup improved how LLMs like ChatGPT understood their content. Basically, what they did is they had these 2 versions of the same website. They asked ChatGPT identical questions. One about the same company with no schema, one with schema, and then they used that and kind of graded those responses. So it is certainly not like a perfectly objective study, but I think in terms of like as much of a control as we can get, they ran a pretty good experiment with that. I think proved some pretty useful stuff. So walking through a bunch of these, wanted to highlight some of the things that they found in this study and some of the differences that they saw with schema versus without schema. So one very clear piece here is like with the schema, they had, more authentic information. They, better presentation overall, included the mission statement of the company. One thing that I think is a very valid concern for marketers with some of these generative engine tools is that it is very difficult to control how these tools are presenting your brand to potential customers. With say your traditional search, there are different elements kind of without and within your control that factor into where you rank on Google, if you rank on Google. But the pages that are ranking are on your site. You created them. You chose exactly how that page represents your brand. And so there's more of that control element around the language you want used, the features you want highlighted, that, maybe there are things that you don't want highlighted, like all of those things. You have a lot of control there because they're ranking specific pages you've created on your site. And that's just not the case for LLMs or for AI overviews in general. They are cherry picking pieces of content from your website. They are also pulling information from other websites. I think, I'm thinking through like for our software clients, like they're looking at G2 reviews. They're looking at some of these other areas. And so schema is a great way to help prevent brand confusion, or like inappropriate isn't really the right word I'm going for, but maybe inaccurate brand perception. By feeding these tools like directly with structured data exactly how you want your organization to be known, it helps them reflect that information versus maybe information it is pulling from other places, which again may or may not be accurate. So just a thought there, something that I know I hear a lot of very valid concerns about, because it's less within our control than what is on our brand's websites. Really thought the product pricing difference was very interesting. With Schema, they pulled just more comprehensive data around what the pricing looks like with reviews, just overall like a more thorough, accurate, comprehensive result, which again, thought was really interesting. With the CEO background, what they found is that, without Schema, there was maybe some confusion around like the personal and the professional of the individuals on their team. With Schema, they were able to really highlight the professional aspects of their CEO's background that are most relevant for someone who is looking for, a product or a service or looking to engage with the brand. So, thinking through organizations where maybe you have a very prominent team member, maybe a founder, a CEO, really anyone on the team who maybe is a more prominent face of the business, and maybe there's a lot of information about them out there. Using Schema can really help distill the most important parts that are most relevant for the business that you want featured most heavily. Awards and recognition, similar story here. You just get a more comprehensive, more accurate, more thorough presentation of information with Schema. Contact information, again, much better presentation here. You also get this, like, what is the contact information, the appropriate contact information for the business versus potentially contact information that's out there for some of those prominent figures. So really interesting study here. I've got it linked. This is another one that I'm happy to share out. Really, really interesting stuff, but wanted to share some of those takeaways because I think, it's valuable to see kind of where some of these can drive value in practice. So it is possible that you might have gotten here and you're still thinking like, okay, Jenny, I get why we're talking about Schema. I get the value of it. I understand the difference it can make. What is it in its essence? Like, actually, what is Schema? We've been talking about it. Great. So Schema Markup, it's also called structured data. It's basically a code. It is code that you put in the back end of your website associated to different elements of either various pages. It can be, associated with the whole page, various elements, things like that. And it basically helps search engines and LLMs better understand and categorize your content and help provide users with better results. So for your like traditional search engine results page, what that could look like, and I've got an example here. Hopefully it's large enough for everyone to see. But like when you've got products that come up, those are using structured data to mark that they are products to know that, that is what should show up. Organization information that will then get included in that like organization tag. Basically, one example that I heard actually recently that I quite liked is these tools are unbelievably smart, but they don't necessarily have like the same critical thinking skills that a human being has. So these bots, right, they read a page that has, or a human reads a page that has quantities, ingredients, and steps. And we understand, right, without having to be told that that is a recipe. If it's a list of ingredients with certain amounts and then steps for how to combine them, we know that that's a recipe. These bots don't necessarily understand that. And so structured data helps them understand, like, this is a recipe, or this is a product, this is a person entity. So just helps them better understand and categorize your content, and helps them digest it more quickly and efficiently. The most common types of schema that we see our clients using, that we're implementing for our clients, are organization, product, FAQ, video, person, and article/blogs. There are actually hundreds of different types of schema markup that can be used for various reasons. But when we're thinking about like what our clients are using the most and finding the most valuable, this is typically what we're looking at. So again, with that organization, being able to include like the official one sentence summary, like if you could describe your business in a single sentence, like this would be it. Making sure that contact information and the website and all of those things is appropriate. That can also help, especially if your business has a name that is more commonplace, whether that is, there are other businesses with the same or very similar names, whether or not, you're using like a single word for your business name, and that word is a word in the English language that sometimes people are looking up definitions for, right? There are a number of ways that Google can sometimes be confused by company names. Organization schema markup is a great way to kind of appropriately differentiate yourself there, as well as make sure that all of that information that it's pulling is accurate and what you want. Product as well. I think a lot of people think about product schema in more of an e-commerce context. So thinking through, right, when you Google, I don't know, best coffee machines, and you've got some of those like product icons or links that show up in that like shopping section. That's often how people think of product schema, but you can use it for lots of other things, including, if you're thinking about like you're a software provider, you've got a page where you talk about different packages, different pricing models. You can use product schema on that page to help, LLMs understand your pricing, your products, those things. It's a little bit more complex for service providers, but it's also possible if you've got like pricing information on your website to use that as well. Person is another one that I think, again, I mentioned with like having a prominent member of your team. Person can be a great one. So, you've got your team member page, you've got your CEO there, you've got a bunch of information. Marking that with the person schema and including the information that is most relevant and most valuable to the business in that schema, really, really valuable there. So again, these are the most common ones that we see from like a B2B perspective. There are loads of others. So very much, highly encourage y'all to go do some exploring on different types of schema and the ways that y'all can implement this. Because there are hundreds, again, of ways to implement this kind of structured data across your website. All right, so when we're thinking about actually implementing schema markup, I think of it as kind of 5 phases. So first, you've got the strategy element, right? Identifying those key entities and pages that you want to put schema markup on. The ones that I will 100% always recommend is making sure that your about page has that organization schema markup. That is like, if I can make one recommendation for everyone to go home and do some homework, that would be the one. Really, straightforward choice to make there, I think is going to drive a lot of value for a lot of people. Now, again, if you're a software provider, thinking about those product schemas, if you've got videos on your page, implementing structured data there. Person is another one that we've talked about. So just, thinking through what are the most important elements of your brand and your website that you want to make sure people understand, and where can structured data help enhance that from that AI perspective. The next one is actually authoring that code. If you are like me and you are not someone who has a lot of like website development experience, I would not consider myself a coder in the slightest. I will talk more about how to do this. It is actually pretty straightforward. You do not need to have a computer science degree to do this. But of course, that is, that next piece is actually writing the code that is going to go onto the website, deploying that code, actually getting that into the back end of your website. Then, of course, you have this kind of maintenance phase, right? Making sure that everything is working smoothly, optimizing that, making adjustments, as time goes on. And then measurement. I think, for a lot of people, measuring AI visibility is kind of nebulous. It's maybe a little bit more of like well, I think we're showing up, but I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not exactly sure how. Couple ways to do this. One, it is, relatively straightforward to use Google Analytics to track referral traffic from like ChatGPT, from Perplexity. Happy to share some resources there. We've got some, and there are a bunch of really great videos on different ways to track traffic from different AI tools. So that is one way to do that. It doesn't really get to the meat of like some of that subjective data around how accurate your brand is being represented. So what I would recommend doing is, before you do any of this, play around a little bit in ChatGPT. Ask it a bunch of questions about the brand, feed it your website, ask it to, provide a company overview, ask it to talk about your products, ask it to, give maybe a detailed description of like your target audience, what you do, all those things. Save those prompts and then rerun those same prompts after you've implemented the schema markup. And that way you can see like, okay, is this getting more accurately represented? Do I want to go back and change any of the information that the schema is including? Things like that. So that one is definitely a little bit, there's less of a data-driven approach there when it comes to how your brand is being perceived and presented. But there are definitely ways where like you as a marketer can understand, do you feel like this is more aligned with your brand than before? So one, I'm going to walk through the process if you are on a HubSpot website of how to implement schema. We also have some pretty detailed information if you are on WordPress. Those are the two that most of our clients are on. And so that's why I'm going to talk about HubSpot today. It's very straightforward. But if you have specific questions about how to implement schema on your specific CMS, whether that is HubSpot, whether that's WordPress, a different CMS, there are loads. Please feel free to reach out. We are always happy to help be a thought partner and help identify resources. This is something our team is doing all the time with clients across different CMSs. So happy to tap our internal resources to help provide support there. So for HubSpot users, basically you're going to start with creating the schema, and there is a website. I've linked it here. I'm happy to share these slides if it's useful, where basically it will generate the code for you, which is lovely. Again, as someone who I am not a coder, I am not a computer scientist. You put in what you want, it creates the code for you. It's pretty straightforward. And again, happy for our team to help be a thought leader or a thought partner here if some support's needed. So then basically in HubSpot, you go to your page where you want to add the schema markup. You click on the HubSpot logo in the upper right corner. Pretty straightforward here. You click edit post. You go to settings. Hopefully we're all tracking. Then you'll scroll all the way down to where you're going to see additional code settings to this like advanced piece. And then basically you're just going to copy and paste the schema into the HTML. That feels, I'm not going to lie, it feels a little nerve-wracking the first time you do it. Feels a little scary, but it is actually not difficult at all. There's also a tool where I think it's on that same schema generator website where you can basically validate your schema. So once you've put it on the website, you can put your website like that page into the tool, and it will basically check to see if your schema is working correctly. And then you can make adjustments there. You know, I'm not going to lie, there is oftentimes like a little bit of a trial and error. That's what our team has found as we have implemented schema across different client websites. But it is more straightforward than you would think. Particularly for HubSpot, I think they've made it very easy. It is relatively straightforward for WordPress as well. And then, you know, happy to assist with other CMSs. So in general, you know, one thing I do want to highlight before we move to questions is our approach to GEO in general. Schema is one small part of this. But when we're thinking about holistically, how do you show up in AI search tools overall, there are a bunch of different things that we look at. So basically, the way that we've structured our approach to GEO is we've created these scorecards. There are 60 plus different factors that we look at that impact GEO performance. Schema markup is kind of one element of those, but we have a bunch of other things that we look at around, you know, other technical elements of the website, brand and author authority, all of those things. So if you are curious about what it might look like to collaborate with us on a GEO audit and then implementing some of those changes, please reach out. Happy to have that conversation. We're working on it with a bunch of clients currently. And I actually do think we have a number of clients who signed up for this webinar. And so if you are a current client and you are curious about how our team can implement schema or do a larger GEO audit, please reach out to your account manager. I'm sure they would be more than thrilled to talk through how we can incorporate that into your existing strategy. All right, last poll that I'll put out while I start answering some questions. Would love to just get a sense from y'all kind of what additional resources would be valuable. You know, I am happy to send out some additional resources after the call, whether that's on GEO in general, tracking AI visibility, specifically implementing schema, or, you know, all of the above. So I will put that poll out there, and I will go ahead and check the results at the end, so that I can get you those resources. I see a lot of people want all of the above. Perfect. Well, you will get some follow-up emails from me later today with a bunch of resources for you. All right, let's move to questions. I see a bunch in the question mark. Yep, I see one that I've already answered. Do you make up your own schema, or are there sources for good schema modeling? Absolutely, schema.org is the place to go. That is what I have linked in the presentation, and I can absolutely send that out as part of a follow-up. I would really not recommend, unless you have a very strong technical background, I would really not recommend trying to make it up yourself. I certainly wouldn't trust myself to do that. There are so many great tools out there. And even honestly, even ChatGPT can be useful sometimes. You know, if you've got something that maybe schema.org has put together and it's maybe not quite what you want, playing around with asking ChatGPT to help you fix that. It's actually an incredibly useful tool. So yes, definitely I would use that. Let's see, from Catherine, I see a question about Drupal. I do not have any immediate resources off the cuff on implementing schema markup for Drupal, but I'm happy to follow up with some of those. I'm confident that our team has some good resources, and I'm happy to ask around and find some of those for y'all. And then let's see, a question from Brooke. Brooke, it's great to see you. It's been a while since we've chatted. If I wanted to implement schema markup into a blog post, should it still go into the head HTML like you showed, or would it go within the HTML of the actual post close to where that list/table lives? That is a fabulous question, Brooke. So I think it depends. If you are doing a general like article schema, which is basically just like, this is an article, here is what the headline of the article is, what it is in general about, I would put it into the head HTML like I showed. If you want to incorporate a more specific type of schema. So there are some more like kind of like subcategories of schema that are, more specific for like infographics, tables, things like that. I would recommend having it go like within the HTML of like the actual element that you're highlighting. Again, kind of difference there. Yes, question from Nicole. Yes, I did not highlight the WordPress resources on the slides, but I absolutely do have those resources. So let me make a quick note of that, and I'm happy to send you those after the presentation is over. Let's see. Perfect. All right. Yeah, we've got some good resources there. I would also really highly recommend, if you're playing around with wanting to implement schema, there are so many useful, very thorough creators on YouTube who have some really great videos. So if you've got like a very specific CMS, I would absolutely see if you can find some videos on it. It's been useful for me just in building my own knowledge. A great question from another Jenny, just with a different spelling. What are a few ways we can improve AI search visibility beyond schema markup? Fabulous question. So, in general, there are a bunch of things, and sorry, I know we are past the 2:30 mark. I'm happy to stay and answer some questions. So if you have to hop off, thank you so much for joining. If you are happy to stay for a few extra minutes, I will happily answer more questions. So for AI search visibility in general, I would say the number one thing that you need to be thinking about for your brand is your overall digital presence and the quality and comprehensiveness of the content on your website. The foundation of good AI visibility is the same foundation for good SEO. LLMs cannot understand your brand if there is not high quality, easily digestible, clear, comprehensive content on your website. So that is like piece number one. My guess is for most of the people here, there is already that ecosystem, but for anyone who might be starting from scratch, that is absolutely where I would start. You have to have good content on your site. Something else to think about is, the overall perception of authority and trustworthiness of your brand as a whole, whether that's on your site or off your site. So some of the things you can do on your site that are really valuable, thinking through client testimonials, thinking through if you have certifications or awards, having those highlighted on your website, and you can use Schema Markup to make those really prominent. Are you talking about results that you've driven for clients? Things like that. Why should anyone trust your brand? In particular, again, if you've got authors on your site that are writing the content, sometimes we'll see like, say we'll take the Nexus blog. We've got, if you've got like the Nexus blog and that is the author of that is just Nexus Marketing versus Rafi Norberg, who is the president of our agency, who has deep experience when it comes to SEO in the sector, making sure that, your content is associated with a credible author, that author has an author bio where you are highlighting why the hell we should be listening to them in the first place, right? Whether or not that means that your CEO, right? My guess is your CEO is not actually going to be writing that content. They probably don't have the time, but, using them as the author of your content can really help. Then there's also that offsite piece. Some of it is harder to control. Some of it is a little bit easier. So thinking through, do you have positive mentions of your brand on, different review sites, on Reddit, on, various social media? If you're using, if you have a YouTube page where you have video content, does that content align with the overall consistent messaging of your brand? Are you consistently putting out thought leadership beyond just your own website? Are you contributing to publications? Maybe are you, putting content on partner sites, things like that. So I would say, thinking through that like overall perception of your brand as a trustworthy thought leader in the space is kind of my biggest kind of overarching recommendation. And then, as I mentioned, there are a bunch of kind of individual things you can do beyond that to make improvements. Another great question from Jenny. Are there other upcoming webinars around AI search visibility and specific content strategy? We are, I'm hosting, this is a monthly webinar series that is primarily focused on AI search visibility. Our next webinar, I can actually share, it is going to be mid-September, and it is going to be a more general GEO focused webinar, but I am more than happy to put together a webinar later this fall on content strategy. So that is, Jenny, that is great feedback. I'm more than happy to take that and incorporate that into our webinar calendar for the rest of the year. And hopefully you were all on our email list, but you should be getting some emails about our upcoming webinars as well. All right, I'm seeing, let's see, I'm seeing some things in the chat. Let me make sure that those are going through. Perfect. Yep, Jen, I will send WordPress instructions for you as well. Let's see. Oh, a question from Alicia. How can we improve our About Us webpage? We are a small team of 3, and we're thinking that if we put ourselves on the page, users might think that a small team might not be able to deliver good results. Alicia, I think that is a really, that's a really valid concern. And I think that is a very thoughtful way to be thinking about the perception of your brand. Now, what I would say is that, for your About Us page, there are a couple of different ways that I think you could go about doing this. So one is leaning into the fact that you are a small team and really highlighting and proactively highlighting the benefits of having a small team with deep expertise. The personal relationships you have with the team, that true one-on-one service that you're providing. I'm not exactly sure, but anyways, I think there are ways to frame that narrative in a more meaningful way. So that's one opportunity there. And then the other, and potentially even as well, using your About page to highlight results that you've seen for the organizations that you've worked with. Another great way to kind of combat that. Another potential way, you don't necessarily have to have like a full team listed out. You could possibly just have, like your founder, your CEO, whoever is like the primary face of the organization and their expertise. You can also talk more about the history of the organization. That's an option as well that is often useful, talking about like how it was founded, what the need came out of, all of those types of things, and focusing less on the size of the team. So a couple different thoughts there. Hope that was useful. It's not something that I've necessarily thought about a lot before, but hopefully that's helpful. All right. It is looking like yep, it's looking like we are done with questions. Everyone, thank you so much for your very thoughtful participation. I will send out a copy of the recording to those of you who would like it. So please feel free to send me an email if you want the recording. I've also got all of the poll results for some of those additional resources. So I will try to follow up by the end of the day today, if not first thing tomorrow morning, with some additional resources that hopefully can be tailored to your organization. And happy to hop on the phone, whether that's later this week or next week, to talk about, ways to implement schema for the organization, answer questions. If you want to talk about what it would look like to collaborate with us, we'd be excited to chat. So I hope y'all have a great rest of your Wednesday. Oh my gosh. Hi, Jamie. Nice to see you. Anyways, I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. All right. Bye.